Hello, economics students. Hey, we're going to start a new unit today. Good news for you is there will be no graphing of supply and demand for the next several weeks. However, don't get too excited because you will see supply and demand pop up in your future later in the semester. But what I want to do for the next few weeks is we're going to get into the different types of business organizations. And we're going to start by looking at relatively simple business organizations, and then we'll move to more complex types of businesses as we continue through this unit. Of course, this picture here is technically a business. What you're looking at, a business could be something as simple as a lemonade stand on the street corner. In fact, some businesses are virtually that simple, and that's what we're going to begin with today. So today we will start with sole proprietorships. This is a very simple form of business organization. And so let's talk about what a sole proprietorship is. It is a business that is owned by one person. It is the most common form of business organization. You may be surprised to learn just how common these sole proprietorships are. They're very easy to start. I could start a sole proprietorship today when I go home if I wanted to. They're very, very easy and simple to start in most cases. And in fact, 72% of all businesses in the United States are sole proprietorships. And that's, of course, is a huge majority of businesses in this country. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the majority of the business revenue, but it is the vast majority of business organizations are sole proprietorships. And many of these sole proprietorships simply are people who are doing some kind of work out of their home. And that's why I say it's so easy to start. As long as you have a computer, you could pretty well start a business from your home today, should you choose to do so. So, there are some advantages to running a business as a sole proprietorship. First of all, the organization structure is very, very simple. Typically, it's just one person. You may hire some people to work for you, but as the sole owner, it is going to be a very simple organizational structure. The profits are yours. You don't have to share the profits with other people, with partners or with stockholders. As the sole owner, you get all of the profits. There are also some advantages in the way that sole proprietorships are taxed. And I'll give you some examples. Let's say that I were to start a business out of my home, and I dedicate maybe 20% of my home to my business. I would have an office in my home. I will have perhaps some storage areas for my business equipment in my home. I could actually write off 20% then. If 20% of my home is dedicated to the sole proprietorship, then I can write off 20% of my mortgage expense. That is the price of my home. I can write that off as a business expense and get a tax deduction for it. Similarly, 20% of my utility bills, electricity, natural gas, water, perhaps telephone, those types of utility bills could also be written off as business expenses, and that would give me some tax breaks. So there are some definite tax advantages to having a sole proprietorship. Also, since you are the sole owner, that gives you total flexibility and control over how you're going to run your business. You don't have to get approval from someone else. You don't have to get buy-in from partners or anything like that. You are the one in control. Of course, that means if your business should fail, that responsibility for failure rests solely on you, but you do have the ability to quickly adjust to changing business circumstances, and that's an important advantage to running a business as a sole proprietor. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't need to have some kind of advice on things. You would still perhaps in certain areas need to hire an attorney, for example, to make sure that you are doing everything above board and legally. But given the assumption that everything you're doing is above board and legal, you have then the flexibility and control to manage your business however you see fit. And there's a real sense of personal accomplishment when you run your business as a sole proprietor. Uh, Oftentimes, the sole proprietors will be members of local chambers of commerce. If you were to go to the Rockford Chamber of Commerce, you would see that most of the businesses there are very small business organizations. Many of them would be sole proprietorships. And successful proprietors will oftentimes get recognition by the local community or through the Chamber of Commerce, which is something pretty nice. To be recognized by your business peers for your accomplishments. That's not untypical of a successful sole proprietor. You will also notice that a lot of sole proprietors are living in very nice homes. If you're a successful sole proprietor, you can get very, very wealthy and live in a very, very nice home, even here in Rockford, Illinois. In fact, many of you may have been to Anderson Japanese Gardens in Rockford. Anderson Japanese Gardens was the private estate of one of our local sole proprietors, the Anderson family, for whom the garden is named. They owned a very successful Rockford, Illinois business, and they then later on, as Mr. Anderson retired and got very, very aged, he donated his estate to Rockford. And that estate was then open to the public as Anderson Japanese Gardens. But what an amazing thing that he was able to do that as a very successful sole proprietor. And he's left a real lasting legacy for the city of Rockford, where he made his mark. Now, there are advantages, but of course there are also disadvantages of sole proprietorship. So we need to take a look at some of them. First of all, and I want to make sure you understand this, unlimited liability. This is a biggie. If you are a sole proprietor and something should go wrong and someone is harmed as a result of your business, you can be sued. And that person who is suing you would have basically unlimited amounts of damages that he could sue you for. So for example, let's say I'm a sole proprietor and I'm selling beef jerky and other smoked meats, which by the way is something I wouldn't mind doing in my retirement. If by chance some of the meat that I am selling should be tainted and contaminated with some kind of bacteria, and as a result of someone eating the food that they purchased from me, they were to get sick and heaven forbid should die because they ate something that was tainted that I sold them, as a sole proprietor, they could sue me for damages. And if someone were to die as a result of eating something that I sold them, those damages could be extremely high, unlimited perhaps, and my entire personal wealth could be subject to damages in this lawsuit. That means not only would these people suing the sole proprietor be able to make a claim for all of the cash that that person has, they could potentially sue and force an individual to sell everything that he owns in order to pay the damages, to convert his home to cash to pay the damages. I could lose, as a sole proprietor, everything I own with unlimited liability against me. So this is a huge, huge disadvantage for sole proprietors, that there is unlimited liability. There's no limit to the amount of money that they can be sued for and potentially have to pay out. Limited resources. As a sole proprietor, your resources are really limited to what you yourself possess and own. So you would find if you needed to, for example, to take a loan out of a bank, banks are going to be much less likely to give a sole proprietor a loan than they would for someone who has more resources at their disposal, perhaps a large corporation or a business that is much larger than your typical sole proprietorship. So it's tough to get the financing to run your business as a small businessman, a small sole proprietor. So that is a significant disadvantage, the limited access to resources to help your business function and grow. There's limited potential. You can, as a sole proprietor, you may be overwhelmed, and growth is limited by the amount of work you can actually put into your business. Now, again, you can hire people to help you do your business and run your business, but then that gets to be rather time consuming as well, because you start focusing on personnel issues rather than on the key component of what you're trying to sell. So limited potential is definitely an issue for a sole proprietor. Lack of permanence. Sole proprietorships will only last as long as the individual that owns the business is willing to work in the business. So what happens when you get old and want to retire? That business will cease to exist. I'm rather sad right now as I'm recording this message in the summer of 2022. I just heard over the weekend that a local restaurant is closing. The people have run this restaurant for 31 years as sole proprietor. And the restaurant is called Sherry's. It's on Forest Hills Road. They're going to go out of business at the end of August 2022. Um, so, that is a lack of permanence. This business will cease to function unless someone should buy it from them, and then change ownership and continue running. But there's absolutely no guarantee that that would happen. And in fact, most sole proprietorships will simply disappear at some point when the owners decide to stop running the business. So we'll finish off by looking at some statistics. You don't need to worry about me testing you on this information, but I do think it's kind of interesting to give you a hint of the role that sole proprietorships play in the American economy. So there's about 25 million non-farm sole proprietorships. And I mentioned non-farm. If you add farms, then that would add a whole lot more to it because many farms are sole proprietorships. Most farms, in fact, probably are sole proprietorships. But others, if you get out of the farm realm, there's still 25 million of them. That's a lot of little businesses. Total income of your sole proprietorships is over $250 billion. That may sound like a lot of money, but it really isn't because we're talking about the entire United States economy, which is well up into the trillions of dollars. So sole proprietor total income at about $250 billion. As big a number as that is, it's not really a major fraction of the total American economy. In fact, it's only about 5% of all business income in the United States. So you can see that sole proprietorships, even though there's a lot of them, remember 71% of all businesses in America are sole proprietorships. They only account for about 5% of business income. And that's important too. Many of these sole proprietorships are not intended to be the primary income factor of a household. The largest sole proprietorship now is huge. It's $11 million in sales, Service Financial out of Milwaukee, but most of them are much, much smaller than that. The average net income today of a sole proprietorship is about $13,000 per year. You cannot live on $13,000 per year very comfortably in the United States of America. So what does that tell you? This tells you that sole proprietorships, most of them at least, are not intended to be the primary income driver of a household. Most of them are simply ways that households can add a little bit additional income and spending money for their needs. And I'll give you an example. My wife runs a sole proprietorship, and she runs that sole proprietorship out of our home. Her income, the most she ever made, was about just right around $20,000, and that was several years ago in one year. But she chooses not to work so hard nowadays that she could make that kind of money. She wants to just get enough work in that she can get, some spending money. I would say in the last few years she's been making roughly $6,000 or $7,000 in her sole proprietorship each year. That's not much money, but it is some additional spending money. We can use it to take a vacation or whatever. So she's made anywhere between about $6,000 up to $20,000 over the last 20 years in her business. She's right there in the average net income of about $13,000. Again, that's not going to make you rich. It is going to be a way to add some comfort to your style of living, however. And with that, we're going to stop this presentation. Make sure you check Canvas to see if there's anything there. And you guys have a great day.